The year is 2028. In a sterile room in California, a room with white walls and gray floors, a young scientist named Anya Sharma stares at a screen. The screen shows a satellite image, a valley scorched brown, the color of dust and failure. For months, this is all she has seen. The Great Drought, they were calling it. Anya is a data analyst for Agrogen, the largest agricultural corporation on the planet. They own this valley, every field, every well, every road, and it is all dying. Her job is to quantify the disaster, to measure the loss in terabytes and dollars. But today, she sees something different, a glitch, an error in the data feed. In the middle of the brown expanse, a perfect square of impossible green. 40 acres of it, vibrant, lush, alive. She reruns the spectral analysis. Chlorophyll density is off the charts. Moisture content is 500% higher than the surrounding land. It can't be right. She zooms in. The resolution sharpens. She can almost see the rows of crops. Not a monoculture, not the endless corn or soy that Agrogen plants. This is something else, a patchwork of textures and colors. Anya feels a strange chill. She picks up her tablet. She calls her superior. A man named Marcus Thorne. He is a senior vice president now, a man who has seen everything. He answers on the second ring. His face appears on her screen, tired, strained. She doesn't waste time. "I'm sending you a file, sir. Sector 11B, the old Miller Valley acquisition. There's an anomaly, a data error, I think." On his end, Marcus opens the file. The image of the green square fills his screen. He goes very, very still. Anya keeps talking. "The readings are impossible. It's like a different ecosystem. We have to find the source of the error. It's throwing off all our projection models." But Marcus isn't listening. He is staring at the green square. His face, a mask of something Anya can't read. Not surprise, not confusion, something older. He whispers a name, just one. Vance. Anya checks the file. There is a note, a single line from an old acquisition report, dated 2012. It reads, "Parcel 734. Vance, Ilara, 40 acres, refused sale, deemed operationally insignificant, not acquired." Anya looks up from her tablet. "Sir, did you say Vance?" Marcus Thorne does not answer. He just stares at the screen, at the 40 acres of life in his desert of failure. He felt something he couldn't quite name, a feeling from 16 years ago, the memory of a kitchen table, a cup of coffee, and the quiet, unshakable dignity of an old woman he tried to save. This is the story of that woman, the one they skipped, the one they wrote off as insignificant. This is the story of the 40 acres they couldn't buy, and the lesson they had to learn, the one written in the dirt. This channel tells the stories nobody else is telling, the stories of quiet strength, the ones the world forgets until it's almost too late. If you believe in those stories, if you believe one person can make a difference, subscribe to this channel, because we find them and we tell them. And the next story is always worth staying for. Let's go back to 2008. The valley was green then. 100 small farms stitched together. Families who had worked the same land for generations. Ilara and Samuel Vance had 40 acres. Not the biggest farm, not the smallest, but it was theirs. They had bought it with 30 years of calloused hands and careful planning. Samuel was a student of the soil. He believed the land was a living thing, that you had to listen to it. He kept old seeds, heirloom varieties his grandfather had planted. He said they had memory. They remembered droughts. They remembered floods. They remembered how to survive. Their neighbors planted the new hybrid seeds, the ones that promised bigger yields, the ones you had to buy every year. Samuel just smiled. He'd hold up a mason jar full of dark, mottled beans. "These know this dirt," he'd say. "That's a better guarantee than any salesman can give you." Elara ran the books. She managed the small farm stand they had on the highway. They weren't getting rich, but they were self-sufficient. No debt, no mortgage, no dependencies. The dirt was enough. Then, one afternoon in late August, the sky was a hazy, tired blue. Samuel was out on the old Alice Chalmers tractor, mending a fence line. Elara was in the kitchen, canning tomatoes. She felt a change in the air, a sudden silence. The chug of the tractor had stopped. She wiped her hands on her apron. She walked outside. She saw the orange tractor still in the field, and she saw Samuel, lying on the ground beside it. His heart had just given out. No warning, no time for goodbyes. By the time she reached him, he was gone. She knelt in the dirt next to him, the dirt he had loved, the dirt he had understood. The community came. They brought casseroles and condolences. They helped with the harvest. They were good people, good neighbors. But after a few months, they went back to their own lives, their own farms, their own struggles. And Elara was alone with 40 acres of land, and the memory of a man who knew how to listen to it. She did her best. She learned the tractor. She studied his planting journals. She kept things going. It was hard. The work was relentless. But the land was her connection to him. Selling was not an option. It was not even a thought. This was home. 4 years passed like that. 4 cycles of planting and harvest, of solitude and memory. Then, in the spring of 2012, the strangers arrived. They drove clean, expensive cars. They wore sharp suits that looked out of place in the valley. They were from a company called Agrigen. They held a meeting in the town hall. The room was packed. Farmers in worn jeans and dusty boots, their faces etched with worry. Commodity prices were down. Fuel costs were up. Everyone was feeling the squeeze. A man named Marcus Thorne stood at the front of the room. He was young, in his 30s. He was confident, polished, and disarmingly kind. He didn't talk like a corporate raider. He talked like a problem solver. He put up a slideshow, charts and graphs, projections. He spoke about efficiency, about economies of scale, about securing the American food supply. He said, "I know you're all working hard, harder than anyone I know, but the system is changing. It's getting harder for family farms to compete. We want to help." Then he made his offer. Agrigen would buy every farm in the valley, every single one. The price he offered was more than fair. It was generous, enough for anyone to pay off their debts, buy a house in town, retire comfortably. He offered pensions, healthcare benefits. He promised to keep local people employed to run the new, larger operation. He sounded reasonable. He sounded like a savior. A murmur went through the crowd. You could feel the tension breaking, the slow release of decades of anxiety. One by one, her neighbors started to agree. The Millers, the Garcias, the Schmidts, families she had known her whole life. They were tired. They saw a way out, a graceful exit. Elara sat in the back, silent. She listened to the promises. She watched her community dissolve. A few days later, Marcus Thorne came to her house. He sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she and Samuel had made every major decision of their lives. He was respectful. He admired the pictures on the wall. He complimented her coffee. He was a very good salesman. "Mrs. Vance," he began, his voice gentle, "I wanted to talk to you personally. We have agreements from all your neighbors. You're the last one." Elara just nodded. She waited. He laid out the paperwork. The numbers were there in black and white. It was a lot of money, more than she had ever seen. He said, "This is hard work. You've been doing it alone for 4 years. You've earned a rest. Think of what you could do. Travel. Spend time with your grandchildren. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing." His concern sounded genuine. It was the most dangerous thing about him. He wasn't a villain. He was a certain person. Certain he was doing the right thing. Certain he knew what was best for her. Ilara looked out the window at the fields, Samuel's fields. She said, "My husband and I built this place. We built it with our hands. It's not just a business, Mr. Thorne." He nodded, a patient, understanding look on his face. "I know. I truly do. But things change. Honestly, we can manage this land more efficiently. Our methods will increase yields by 200%. It's for the greater good. Feeding more people. That's our mission." She met his eyes. "And what are your methods?" He didn't hesitate. GPS-guided tractors, drone surveillance for pests, patented hybrid seeds engineered for drought resistance and high yield. A closed system, perfectly managed. She thought of Samuel's jars of heirloom seeds, the ones with memory. "I'll stay," she said. Her voice was quiet but firm. Marcus Thorne was surprised, just for a moment. Then his professional kindness returned. He leaned forward. "Mrs. Vance, Ilara, let me be frank. Your 40 acres, it's an operational island. It's too small for us to integrate efficiently. It breaks up our grid pattern for irrigation and planting. It's a logistical headache." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The offer is generous, but it's not just about the money. If you stay, you'll be surrounded. Our equipment runs 24/7. The dust, the noise, the town will change. The co-op will close. The services you rely on will disappear. It will be very difficult for you. I'm not trying to threaten you. I'm trying to protect you from what's coming. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not out of anger, not out of spite, but by someone who genuinely believed they were protecting you. By someone who was certain of your limits. That is the quietest, most devastating kind of fight there is. It can't be fought with anger. It can only be disproven, with decades of work. Ilara didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She just looked at him, a long, steady gaze. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Thorne, but I will stay." He sighed, a small, disappointed sound. He saw a stubborn old woman, clinging to the past. He couldn't see the truth. He couldn't see the strength he was dismissing. He gathered his papers. He stood up. "All right, Mrs. Vance, we won't force you. We'll work around you. Don't you worry about a thing. It's better this way." Those were his final words to her. Not a threat, a dismissal. He believed he was doing her a favor, by leaving her behind, by writing her off as insignificant. He left. The sound of his expensive car faded down the gravel road. Ilara sat alone at the kitchen table. The silence of the house was immense. She looked at the empty chair where Samuel used to sit. For a moment, the weight of it all pressed down on her. The loneliness. The sheer scale of what she was facing. Then her eyes fell on something on the bookshelf, an old seed catalog from 1972. The cover was faded. The pages were soft with use. It was Samuel's. She took it down. She opened it. His handwriting filled the margins. Notes on germination rates, on frost tolerance, on which beans grew best next to which squash. On the inside cover he had written something, a phrase she had heard him say 1,000 times. "The land remembers." She closed the catalog. She held it to her chest. The decision was made. Not in anger, not in defiance, but in memory, in love. She stood up. She walked out the back door, and she went to work. The first few years were just as Marcus Thorne had predicted. They were hard. Agrogen moved in with overwhelming force. Giant machines like insects from another planet descended on the valley. They tore out the old fence lines. They leveled the gentle hills. They filled in the small ponds. They erased 100 years of family farming in a single season. Ilara's 40 acres became an island, a tiny square of the past surrounded by a sea of corporate agriculture. The noise was constant, the roar of machinery day and night. The dust was a permanent haze in the air. It coated her windows, it settled on her porch, it gritted in her teeth. The town died. The feed store closed, the hardware store closed. The small church where she was married held its last service. The families she had known her whole life moved away, replaced by transient workers who lived in temporary housing. Her wells started to go dry. Agrogen had drilled massive deep-bore wells. They were pulling water from the deep aquifer, sucking the life out from under her feet. She was isolated. She was alone. But she was not defeated. Exclusion forced innovation. She couldn't buy the patented Agrogen seeds. She couldn't afford the synthetic fertilizers they used. She didn't have access to their technology. So she went back to basics. She went back to Samuel's knowledge. She took out the old jars of heirloom seeds, the Anasazi beans, the Hopi blue corn, the Sonoran white pomegranate, seeds that had grown in arid lands for 1,000 years, seeds that had memory. She stopped plowing. She learned about no-till farming, about leaving the roots of last year's crops in the ground to hold the soil, to prevent erosion. She started a compost system, using every scrap from her kitchen, every leaf from her yard. She built living soil, rich and dark and full of microbes, soil that could hold water like a sponge. While the fields around her were bare dirt, baked hard by the sun, her land was covered. She planted cover crops, clover and vetch and rye, plants that fixed nitrogen in the soil, plants that were a living green manure. She practiced polyculture. She planted beans next to corn, next to squash, the three sisters, an ancient method. The corn provided a stalk for the beans to climb. The beans fixed nitrogen for the corn. The broad leaves of the squash shaded the ground, keeping it cool, preventing weeds, a perfect, self-sustaining system. The few locals who were left watched her. Some shook their heads. They saw a foolish old woman playing in the dirt. "She's just holding on to ghosts," they'd say at the post office. "It's a shame." But a few understood. An old mechanic named George. His shop had been forced out of business by Agrogen's in-house service centers. He saw Ilara's Alice Chalmers tractor broken down in the field one day. He just showed up with his toolbox. He didn't ask for money. He spent a whole afternoon fixing a cracked fuel line. When she tried to pay him, he waved his hand. "Don't you argue with me, Ilara. Your husband gave my dad a loan to start this shop back in '68. A handshake deal. We don't forget that." He kept coming back. He helped her tune the engine. He found her spare parts online. He kept that old orange tractor running. A small act of rebellion. A quiet alliance. Have you ever been completely alone in a decision? When everyone around you, with the best of intentions, told you to give up? When the world you knew disappeared, and you had to build a new one, all by yourself, with nothing but memory and a patch of dirt? Tell us about it in the comments. Because what Ilara Vance did next, she did by herself. The quiet work began to pay off, slowly at first, then all at once. This is where the story becomes bigger than one woman. This is where the land starts to speak. By 2015, The first signs of a long-term drought appeared. The spring rains were lighter than usual. The summer was hotter. Ilara's yields were down about 10%. She worried. But then she heard the numbers from the Agrigen workers. Their yields were down 15%. Their high-tech hybrid corn was already suffering. Cash. She sold her produce at a farmer's market 50 miles away. It was enough. By 2018, the drought had tightened its grip. The reservoir levels were falling. Water rationing began. Agrigen's fields were a pale, sickly green. Their automated irrigation systems ran constantly, pouring precious water onto thirsty, lifeless soil. But on Ilara's 40 acres, something was different. Her soil, rich with organic matter, held the morning dew. Her deep-rooted heirloom crops were finding moisture far below the surface. Her yields were stable. She had enough to sell, and enough to save. Cash. She bought a small, efficient drip irrigation system, using a fraction of the water of her neighbors. By 2022, the word drought was in every headline. The valley was baking. Agrigen's costs were skyrocketing. The cost of water, the cost of fertilizer to prop up the stressed plants. Their profits were shrinking. Marcus Thorne, in his California office, saw the reports. He saw the rising costs in Sector 11B. He approved the drilling of new, deeper wells. He never once thought about the small, unacquired parcel in the middle of it all. The rounding error. The operational island. Meanwhile, Ilara was thriving. Her produce was gaining a reputation. Chefs from the city started driving out to her farm. They had never tasted tomatoes like hers. Corn with such flavor. Her farm stand had a waiting list. She hired a local teenager, the granddaughter of her old neighbor George, to help her. She paid her well. Cash. By 2025, the Great Drought had its name. It was no longer a weather pattern. It was a new reality. Agrigen's fields were turning to dust. The topsoil, with no roots to hold it, was blowing away in the wind. Their expensive, patented seeds were failing. They were engineered for perfect conditions, for abundant water and chemical inputs. They had no memory. They had no resilience. They knew nothing of the dirt they were planted in. Ilara's 40 acres were an oasis, a testament to a different kind of wisdom. From the road, it looked like a miracle, a patch of impossible green in a world of brown. And from his office, 200 miles away, Marcus Thorne was finally starting to notice the glitch in the data, the anomaly that wouldn't go away. The 40-acre square that was outproducing his multi-thousand-acre sectors. He assumed it was a sensor malfunction. He ordered a diagnostic. He was a man who believed in data. He had forgotten how to believe in dirt. That brings us back to 2028, back to the sterile room, and the young scientist, Anya Sharma. She refused to accept it was a data error. She had triple-checked everything. The data was real. The green was real. She spent a week compiling a report. Not just satellite imagery, soil composition analysis from old surveys, historical yield data from the county extension office. She put it all together. A story told in numbers. A story of two farming methods. One, vast, expensive, and failing. The other, small, traditional, and succeeding against all odds. She presented it to Marcus Thorne. He read it in silence. His face was grim. The numbers were undeniable. The contrast math was devastating. Agrigen's input cost per bushel was 10 times higher than Ilara's. Their water usage per acre was 50 times higher, and their yield was now 0. Hers was stable. "We have to see it," Anya said. "We have to understand how she's doing it." Marcus Thorne, a senior vice president, a man who managed billions of dollars in assets, felt a deep, unsettling feeling, the feeling of being profoundly wrong. He agreed. The next day they drove out to the valley. The dust was so thick it was like a fog. They passed mile after mile of dead, withered crops. The scale of the failure was breathtaking. Then they saw it, the green square. It was even more shocking in person. Marcus pulled his electric luxury vehicle over to the side of the road. He got out. He just stood there, looking at the life erupting from her land. He saw corn, beans, and squash growing together. He saw rows of sunflowers. He saw fruit trees he couldn't identify. He heard the buzz of insects, the sound of life. His own fields were silent. Anya had a handheld sensor. She was taking readings. The soil humidity is 60%. Organic matter is at 12%. This is impossible. Our soil is at less than 1%. Marcus walked towards the farmhouse. His expensive shoes were covered in dust, the dust of his own failure. He saw her, Ilara Vance. She was sitting at a simple wooden table under a large oak tree. She was sorting seeds. Her hands, gnarled with age and work, moved with a slow, deliberate grace. She was older. Her face was a roadmap of sun and seasons, but her eyes were the same, clear, steady, unflinching. She looked up as he approached. She recognized him immediately. He had more gray in his hair, more lines around his eyes, but he was the same man, the kind man who had tried to save her. He stopped a few feet from her table. He didn't know what to say. "Hello, Mrs. Vance," was all he could manage. She nodded. "Mr. Thorne." The silence stretched out, filled only by the sound of bees in the clover. Anya approached, her face full of awe. "Ma'am," she said, "what you've done here, it's extraordinary. We need to understand your methods." Ilara looked from the young scientist to the older executive. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. Her victory was quiet. It was made of soil and water and memory. It needed no announcement. Marcus finally found his voice. It was heavy with the weight of 16 years. "We were wrong," he said. It was that simple, that complete. He gestured back at the dead fields behind him. "Everything is failing. Our seeds, they can't handle this. We've lost the entire crop. Across 5 states, the company is facing a catastrophic loss." He looked at the seeds in her hands. Dark, speckled seeds of a dozen different shapes and sizes. "We need your seeds," he said. "We need seeds that know how to survive. We will pay you anything you ask. Name your price." He thought it was about money. He still thought it was about money. Ilara looked down at the seeds in her palm. She remembered Samuel. She remembered his voice. "These know this dirt." She looked back at Marcus Thorne. Her gaze was not triumphant. It was devastatingly calm. "You didn't want my land, Mr. Thorne. You said it was an operational island. You said it wasn't worth the trouble." He flinched. He remembered the words. He remembered the easy confidence with which he had said them. She continued, her voice even. "But it's the land that made these seeds. The land remembers what you tried to forget. You can't just buy the seeds. You have to earn them. You have to learn to listen." He had nothing to say. She was right. He had come to buy a product. He had failed to understand it was a process, a relationship, a form of wisdom. Then she said something that changed everything. "I will help you, not for money, for a contract." He looked at her, confused. "A contract?" "Yes. You will create a new division within Agrogen, the Division of Applied Legacy Agriculture. You will fund it. You will staff it with young people who want to learn, and you will put her in charge of it." She nodded towards Anya, the young scientist who had seen the truth in the data. "And you will start here. by restoring the soil in this valley. You will lease the land back to families who want to farm this way. You will give them my seeds, and you will teach them my husband's methods." It was not a negotiation. It was a statement of terms. The price for her seeds was not money. It was repentance. It was a fundamental change in the way they did business. It was a legacy. Marcus Thorne stood in the shade of the old oak tree, defeated by a stubborn old woman and a handful of seeds. He looked at Anya, whose eyes were wide with a combination of terror and excitement. He looked at the vibrant, living farm around him, and he looked at the dead, empty empire he had helped build. He made the only choice he could. He said, yes. The Vance Protocol, they called it. It started on the 40 acres, and it spread. Anya Sharma became the director of the new division. She worked alongside Ilara every day, learning, listening, documenting a lifetime of knowledge. They established the Samuel Vance Scholarship, a fund for young farmers who wanted to learn regenerative agriculture. Agrogen, the corporate giant, began the slow, painful process of healing the land it had broken. They brought in compost by the trainload. They planted miles of cover crops. They began to reintroduce diversity. It was expensive. It was slow. Many on the board of directors thought Marcus Thorne was insane. But the drought did not end, and the Vance Protocol was the only thing that worked. Small farms began to pop up again in the valley, leasing land back from the corporation, planting the heirloom seeds. The town started to breathe again. A new co-op opened. A farmers' market was established. The children of the families who had sold out and left started to come back, drawn by the promise of a future their parents had been forced to sell. Ilara never left her 40 acres. She stayed in her small house. She worked her land. She taught anyone who came to learn. Her triumph was not in defeating Agrogen. It was in remaking it. Today, if you visit the valley, you will see a patchwork. Some large corporate fields still struggling, and many smaller, vibrant farms, oases of green. If you go to the main office of the new co-op, you will find a young woman behind the counter, one of the first recipients of the Samuel Vance Scholarship. She is showing the new farmer a jar of seeds, dark, mottled beans. "These have memory," she says. "They know this dirt." And in the old barn on Ilara's farm, the one with the orange tractor parked inside, there is an old seed catalog hanging on the wall. Its pages are worn thin. Its cover is bleached by the sun. Sometimes, a student visiting the farm will take it down. They will touch the pages reverently, as if it is a sacred text. Ilara will see them, and she will walk over. She will point to the handwritten notes in the margins. "It's not about the seeds," she will say. "Not really. It's about the notes. It's about paying attention. It's about listening to what the land is telling you." The most dangerous limitation is the one delivered with a kind smile, the one that says, "I'm doing this for your own good." Certainty is a cage, built by people who think they are protecting you from failure. Ilara Vance spent 2 decades proving that kindness without respect is just a softer form of dismissal. She proved that the dirt is enough. That one small plot of land, cared for with memory and wisdom, can be more powerful than 1,000 acres managed with arrogance. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is being told they can't. They're being told to rest, to give up, to sell out. They're being told it's for the best. If you know someone who needs to hear this story, share it with them. If you believe these stories of quiet, relentless strength matter, subscribe to this channel and tell us in the comments, what is the land you will refuse to sell?